Hi and welcome back to Cheeky Crypto. Today guys, we're going to be jumping down into the world of Terra Luna to see what's been going on most recently and to kind of get a good idea and grasp over what the latest news and events are for Terra Luna. As I get into this video, if you find it useful and informative, hit the like button. I really do appreciate that. If you happen to be new to the channel, then why not go ahead and subscribe, tap the bell, select all notifications, and in doing so you will be kept up to date with everything that we do here at Cheeky Crypto. If you haven't yet joined us in Discord, links in the description down below. It's a fantastic community talking crypto 24/7. It's completely free and I don't think you'll be disappointed by what you find down there, so why not go ahead and check it out today. Okay guys, with all that said, done out of the way, let's jump on down into the desktop and start covering off what's been going on in the last few days with Terra Luna. Okay, we'll just start things off with the usual kind of price analysis. Obviously, there isn't too much to really talk about. We had obviously dropped down really significantly. We take a look at the daily. We are still pulling back here. There's not much really to kind of note or to kind of talk about at this point. I would expect some kind of, regular trading to kind of resume at some point with the new meme coin that is Luna currently. So we'll just kind of leave that there. It is still obviously pulling back down. There were some significant moves to the upside that were had originally when Binance started to list it against BUSD. After the initial kind of crash, we had some surges up and all that kind of stuff. But right now, there isn't actually anything worth noting. But let's jump over into the first piece of news, right? So 𝗕𝗓𝗀𝗧𝗏 says that the Luna tattoo is a constant reminder that investing requires humility. So essentially, this is actually quite a nice piece. I thought I'd start with this. You can kind of see this just here. And basically, Mike 𝗕𝗓𝗀𝗧𝗏, the billionaire founder of crypto asset management firm Galaxy Digital, has told his followers that his Luna inspired tattoo will serve as a reminder to remain humble in the world of venture capital investing. So really cool to kind of take that kind of perspective on it. He's not the only one. I think Binance also went through, I think, a $1.3 billion investment in Luna down to just $3,000, right? So they lost significant amounts of cash, from their investments in Luna. But again, this is kind of the play. There's obviously plenty of other areas that these billionaires are invested in. So for example, they'll be heavily invested in Solana, for example. They'll dump on that one at some point, and they'll be fine long term, I'm sure. But I think essentially this is a nice kind of reminder to just say, even under these kind of scenarios, we can have teachings, we can have learnings about how we are acting going forward, right? And I think that's quite a nice little piece to kind of start with. But let's now move on into the more interesting kind of stuff for Terra Luna, right? So Grim Reaper's Financial Crimes Unit revived to investigate the Terra collapse. Now, after only 2 years, the feared investigative and prosecutorial team has been reformed by the new president to look into the mess caused by Terraform Labs. Okay, so this is going to be really interesting to see how this kind of plays out. And if you watch till the end of the video, we've got another really interesting thing to kind of go through as well. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I will link this into the description for you guys to have a read at your leisure and all that kind of usual stuff. But basically, and they're going to be taking a deep dive into what has been going on at Terraform Labs and whether or not there is serious issues with Do Kwon and all the kind of stuff that was going on at Terraform. So really interesting kind of read. So I'm not going to go through it here. But again, I'll link it into the description. Check it out. But I do think there's going to be some interesting revelations and some interesting developments over, in South Korea in the sense of everything that's going on with Terraform Labs, and potentially what might happen next is going to be really eye-opening, I think, for many investors who were investing in Luna. Now, as we kind of move across here, we can obviously take a look. Yeah, basically yesterday was the polling day, right? To kind of get an idea as to what is potentially going on, what with the community. What's the community feeling? What are they likely to kind of see? Now, there's a few interesting things about this, but obviously here we have Cointelegraph just kind of reporting that the early polling from the vote is indicating that 91% are in favor of a rebirth, which is interesting because that's not the vibe that I get from the community. From seeing all the comments and all of that kind of stuff, basically a revive or a yeah, I mean, the governance proposal 1623 to rename the existing network 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗧𝗏 and Luna Classic and rebirth a new Terra blockchain and Luna is now live. So this is the one that they're talking about. Basically, they're talking about forking it, calling the existing system Classic Luna, and then rolling with a new one. Now, from my understanding, this was not really in favor across all the comments, across Twitter, across the Discord. This is actually being more of slammed as a sham, a scam, and something that the community don't want. So it's really interesting to see that 91% are in favor of this. This is definitely the opposite of what we get from a sentiment perspective through the comment sections of the videos, or from Twitter, or even from the Discord server. So really interesting to kind of figure out what is going on here with that kind of majority. It's an interesting kind of perspective on it. So I want to start with that, right? Vote no for the Luna v2 fork and vote for burn proposal instead. And I'm going to go through that in a second, right? Because what we've got here is basically the whitelist burn and a remedy proposal. So this voting has been removed again. So this one keeps getting removed, and I'm not sure why. Mainly because I think it wouldn't necessarily favor well to 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗏 and the Terraform Labs, etc. So this one keeps getting put up and taken down, put up, taken down, etc. But basically, this is a majority of voting yes. They want the burn. They want to burn the tokens, and they want to continue with the ecosystem as it is, no fork, right? But it keeps getting taken down. And then, of course, we have this one. Now, this is interesting. I don't know how factual this is, how to verify it, etc. But there are some interesting things about this that we can then obviously go into later, right? So basically, this is saying that the proposal, the 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗏 proposal, is a massive fraud. Basically, the poll started with 11 million yes votes, only so after only 2 minutes, right? And then the community started to vote a massive no, 11 million no votes. A few minutes later, millions of no votes were erased. Essentially, this isn't necessarily the case, but there are a couple of screenshots here. You can see that there were 11 million no votes, and then obviously that's significantly changed to just 7,000, right? So you can get the idea that that's significant reductions are in there. But obviously, at the same time, you have to acknowledge that those votes can change, right? It's not necessarily that anything is happening there, but votes are changing or mixing around and all of that kind of stuff. So who knows, right? It's interesting, but basically, you go from a significant percentage shift around here, and it is interesting kind of take on that, because obviously we can see here that 91% are in favor of the rebirth, but maybe that isn't necessarily the case. I don't know. I'll leave that one for you guys to kind of figure out. I just kind of give you what's actually out there circulating. My thoughts on it are that the sentiment from what I can see isn't that a 91% want to fork the network. So this feels a little bit disingenuous. But again, I have no factual evidence of that. So if anyone does, let me know in the comments below how you feel about this. Do you think that 91% of the community are in favor of forking the network, renaming the current Luna system as Luna Classic, and then creating a new Terra Luna ecosystem with all of the existing branding as is, which to me just feels a little bit off, but I get it. It can work. I don't think it will, but it can. There's always the off chance. So with all that being said, that's kind of that. And then, of course, we have this piece, which is a really interesting piece. Okay, so and this then just circles me round to, was the entire thing a scam the entire time? Now, personally, I don't think that is the case. If it were, then they could have done this at the peak, right? And they could have walked away with a significant amount more cash if it were a scam from the get-go. However, this is odd. Okay, and it's odd in itself. It doesn't necessarily mean there's anything bad about this. It just means that the timeline of events are, you could chalk them up as a coincidence. However, I think most people, generally, if you're, following kind of logical paths, coincidences don't generally happen very often. They're incredibly rare events. Instead, what we kind of consider quite common, kind of tongue-in-cheek of phrase as a coincidence actually is not really a coincidence. It's by design. So just kind of keep these things in the back of your head as I get into this, right? So 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗏 dissolved Terra Luna's Korean entity days before the crash. And they called it crash, but we could probably call that the depegging event. Okay, and also about this, there was also an interview with 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗠 circulating around a few weeks before, where he was talking about how 95% of crypto companies are not going to survive a bear market. Then it's going to be fun to watch them, get destroyed. And there's a little bit of irony in that, but also his behavior, his body language during that tongue-in-cheek conversation was also very interesting. So if you haven't seen that, do search for it. I think it's on Twitter. It's on various different places. It's just his body language, his tone, and all of those other kind of tells that are interesting now to look back at it in reflection of what's happened. And obviously knowing this as well. So just bear all those things in mind. And obviously I'll circle back to this financial crimes unit that is now being revived. And all these things are starting to come together quite nicely, if you understand what I mean. So a newly formed Wikipedia page on Terraform Labs founder, the 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗠, is up and running, which highlights his fall from grace. The Wikipedia page suggests that 𝗕𝗘𝗪 tried to dissolve Terraform Labs entity in Korea just days before the historic crash. Now, what we don't know is if this is factual or not. Okay, and it says tried, so I'm going to assume if you've tried, it was unsuccessful. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this, and I'm going to pick up on words and phrases that are used here to help kind of keep an objective view to it, right? We don't want to necessarily just believe this blindly. Okay, I think that would be foolish. And we should use this and then make some educated guesses and do further research on it, right? Always do your own research. So when it says tried to, that tells me that it hasn't actually been dissolved, right? It just means he tried to dissolve it. And I would like to know if there's any evidence of that, whether he's been tried to dissolve it through strike-off processes or whatever, right? But nonetheless, it tried to dissolve Terraform Labs entity in Korea just days before the historic crash. Terraform Labs is now incorporated in Singapore. Okay, so they've got, as I read this, they've tried to dissolve it in Korea, but they haven't been able to, because otherwise it would say they did. Okay, it just says they tried. So therefore it still exists in Korea, as I understand that, as that sentence would read to me. And there's a new entity that has been incorporated, okay, that is now incorporated in Singapore. Okay, but the entity did not apply for a license under the Payment Service Act, reveals this Wikipedia page. Again, we do not know how accurate that is. Did they apply but haven't heard back? Have they got anything else to kind of go on? I don't know. But therefore, it is still not a notified entity even in Singapore. So they're saying that it's not technically an entity in Singapore without this license. The firm has not been granted a temporary exemption from holding a license by the Monetary Authority of Singapore. And again, I assume that this stuff is verifiable, and you could probably check this out. I'm not going to do that in this video, but again, these are things that you might want to look into if you're really big into Terra Luna ecosystem and you want to kind of get to the bottom of this. I don't have the time, but you might find that you do. So as the documents hyperlinked, so there's documents, that's good. Kwon filed to dissolve the company, a Korean entity, on April the 30th, 2022. The filing was done by the Supreme Court of South Korea's Registry Office and was approved on 4th of May to dissolve the entity just days before the UST. So okay. I think this is really badly written then. So they haven't just tried it. There's apparently links to documentation that says that they have basically started the process of being dissolved, and it started on the 4th. Okay, so if they're going to do that, and then obviously going to go up over to Singapore. So that looks like it's a done deal, right? And dissolving a company takes time. It's not something that's instantaneous. If anyone's ever had to do that before, I've had to do it a few times. And essentially, it isn't something that happens quickly. Instead, it's something that actually takes a fair bit of time, because people, creditors and so forth, can object against you dissolving the company if you owe money and whatnot. So as a note on that effect, I'm not sure about Korea specifically, but in the UK, if Terraform Labs were to be dissolved in country A, and let's say you had an objection to it, you should be able to object again, prevent it from being dissolved. Just food for thought there. Okay, so it may have been approved, but there's usually some kind of an appeal kind of process. So I'll check that out if you are wanting to kind of get into that in more detail. Cool. So the Wikipedia page took excerpts from the Straits Times that highlighted its licensing and regulatory issues. I'm not going to go through all of that, but I think that's basically kind of the hint of what we just read about. And then obviously it goes into a little bit more of the detail here. So I think essentially what's important here is to note that is this a coincidence that Do Kwon tried to dissolve it in Korea days before that, before the crash? The fact that it's not potentially licensed over in Singapore, so therefore the entity might not, fully exist. Now, here in the UK, and I can only speak from a UK perspective, when a company goes through that dissolving process, there's a time period where basically it goes into the Gazette and you can appeal it if you're a creditor, if you're owed money, etc., and you can prevent a company from being dissolved. So just because they filed and it's been approved for to be dissolved doesn't mean it has actually been dissolved yet. And as a result of that, they are still liable. Okay, they are still incorporated as I would understand it. Okay, as for Singapore, well, they not technically be up and running there yet. Okay, so you would only require a license for that company to start in those active trading, of that activity, right? So if they haven't fully dissolved in Korea yet, and they're not actually actively doing much with the company or incorporation in Singapore, then that licensing I think will come in due course. I'm not sure this is a scam as such, but it'll tell you what will be really interesting over the whole entire thing is whether or not these Grim Reapers are going to find something a little bit more than what Wikipedia pages are telling us. But it'll tell you one thing: things like these scenarios where millions of votes are changing, we have companies being dissolved, and we've got Grim Reapers being resurrected to basically and specifically investigate the Terra Luna collapse. I think it's important that we understand there might be more to this story than we are all being told. Guys, I'm going to leave the video there. If you have found this useful and informative, hit the like button. I really do appreciate that. If you happen to be new to the channel, then why not go ahead and subscribe? Tap the bell, select all notifications, and in doing so, you will be kept up to date with everything that we do here at Cheeky Crypto. With all this said, done, and out of the way, I hope everyone has a fantastic day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.